Now, are you able to see me on Facebook? No?
No, not yet.
Okay.
It might be a little delay.
Okay. Are you able to see me on Facebook now?
No.
Okay. Because
Wait,
it's
wait, wait. It says John Fisher is live now.
okay, good. So tell me if you can see me. Do you see me?
There you are. I see
Okay,
you.
excellent. Um,
And I'll be
so
able to record.
what's that?
I will be able to
Okay, why
record.
don't you turn record on now? And can you get us into our lobby cards?
Yep.
Thank you. So we're recording.
We are recording.
Okay. And you're going to do lobby cards?
Looking for those lobby cards now.
Okay. No. There we go.
Okay.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to go off screen. I'm going to turn off my mic and my video. Okay, and I'll check back in with you in a little bit. Yeah,
Okay. And I'll do the same.
and I check in with you, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think we need the music. Let's just skip the
Yep.
music. Okay, good. And you see us on Facebook Live.
I do.
Okay, great. I'll check back in with you. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Okay. Bye.
Oh, wait a second. I'm going to put into chat. There we go. Okay, thank you. And our names are correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. And great. I'll see you in a bit. Thanks, Joe. Please, folks, pay attention. Please, folks, may I have your attention? Attention, please. I do what's shown in my hand, this very hand. Please observe me if you will. I'm Professor Harold Hale. And here to other observers see both standing up. Well, think of my friends how they the gold trombone. La da 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 da. You know my friends how hateful trumpet players did to the famous people of Australia. What do you want to watch? Well, they don't do my friends the same voice, but they hear me. I say, no, you see, first band on HKCK. Well, Professor Harold Hale, I reached this morning, of course, which was the way they give you that, because I'm going to tell you, friend. And you'll see the class you give me, said, was over 10 times the things that they can do, like Bill Clinton's attorney. But after all, with the big creed, with every single and for me, I sit sorry those great thank God it's no offense in these thank you in his nation. I promise you a happy ending. Rough contentment. I promise you a happy ending. I promise you a happy ending, like the ones you've seen on the screen, where times are times, not so lonely, and preachers cry the Bibles. And if you find it rough and tender, if the tension holds its through, I can promise you a happy ending. Folks, Hey, Joe. Are you there? Joe.
I am here.
Hey. I'm just going to do a final sound check uh, on this. Let me just get the sound up. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. And great. And test, 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 test. How's that? Test.
Sounds good.
Good. Excellent. And let me put that away. And my video looks good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And we're all set to go. We're on Facebook Live.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. So I'm going to step away and we'll start shortly. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. You all set, Joe?
I'm ready.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. I'll be back in a minute. Thank you. Yay! Hello, I'm John Fisher, and this is A Death in the Family. This is a story of my father and his passing. And this is a very hard story for me to tell. I mean, for a lot of reasons. For the obvious one, it's just a tough story to talk about your father's passing. But also, I've told this story before a couple of times. I've struggled with it. I've tried to find the answer to this riddle. I wrote 2 plays about it. In one of them, I even played my father. I wrote a monologue about it for a young actress. And I've also talked a lot about it and told the story many, many times. And that's the toughest thing about this story is it has a big mystery at the center of it. And that's what I hope to solve tonight. The mystery. The mystery of my father's passing. My first awareness of fathers and death was in this old movie that I loved. I discovered it when I was a teenager on TV. And it starred Robert Preston, one of my favorites, one of my all-time favorites, and it's called All the Way Home. And it's an incredible movie because Robert Preston isn't like he is in any other movie. He's not the big presentational Robert Preston. He's very simple, he's very honest, and he plays the father, the wonderful father of this little boy named Rufus. And Rufus is about this big. I mean, he's a tiny little boy. And the first scene is Rufus sitting in a movie theater watching Charlie Chaplin. It's a period piece. It's set in the 20s. He's watching Charlie Chaplin and laughing his head off. And right next to him is his father, Robert Preston. And he laughs too, but more than that, he just looks at his little son and beams. He just loves that little boy. He loves him to death. And the little boy laughs and laughs and laughs and laughs. And Charlie is up there and he's stuck in a hole and he's pushing some guy through a hole and he's using a bat to wedge the guy through the hole. And the little boy laughs and laughs and laughs. And Robert Preston just keeps beaming at the little boy. And he reaches over and he puts his arm around the little boy's shoulder. And the little boy is so small, it's more like his hand around his shoulder. And he just beams at him. The love that pours out of him is magical. He loves that little boy. And then the best scene is at the end. At the end of the movie, they get up and Robert Preston holds his little hand and they go down the aisle and then they go up the central aisle, they go out of the theater and suddenly they're outside at night and they're imitating Charlie Chaplin on the streets of this little town. And Robert Preston goes first. He goes down the street of this little town and he does the Charlie Chaplin walk. He does that great walk that Charlie Chaplin does. And he's spinning his cane and doing that walk and doing the thing with his hat and he's scratching his legs. You know that great thing he does with his legs? And then the little boy comes down the sidewalk right after Robert Preston and he's doing the walk too. It is the cutest thing. He's this little micro boy, this tiny, tiny micro boy. He's going down the sidewalk doing this cute, cute thing like this. And he does the little cane thing and he tilts his hat and then Robert Preston disappears around the corner. Where'd Robert Preston go? Where'd he go? Where did Papa go? And the little boy, he runs around the corner. He dashes around the corner and Robert Preston scoops him up and hugs him. And he's just a little moppet. He's the tiniest little thing you've ever seen. He is minuscule. And Robert Preston just holds him to him and smiles. And then they head home. But first they go to a bar and Robert Preston knocks back a few and the little boy sits on the bar. And they put him on the bar and they look at him and he eats crackers while his father sips drinks. And then they go and watch trains and all this beautiful smoke puffing up. And Robert Preston just keeps beaming at this little boy. And then they go home to the mother, to Gene Simmons. And it is amazing because Robert Preston's performance in this movie isn't like any other performance in any of his other movies. It's not presentational. It's not big. It's not song and dance. It's just him connecting to his wife. He's like a method actor in these scenes with his wife. He's incredible. And he and his wife just talk to each other and he looks her in the eyes. And it's all about eye contact, eye contact. But he's totally sincere. I mean, and he has his old Robert Preston deliveries, those deliveries that make you sure that everything's going to be okay. Oh, everything's going to be fine. I know, it's all going to be fine. I'll take care of it. I can see the future. But then he goes back to connecting to the characters. And it's wonderful. It's like Marlon Brando in Robert Preston's body. And the screenplay is incredible because it has all these cute little things in it, sort of subliminal things. And the mother is pregnant. Yeah, she's pregnant. And the little boy is asking about what's coming, what's going on. He doesn't know. And Robert Preston holds the little boy and he says, you know, we're going to have to help your mother out from now on. We can't keep expecting her to do things for us. We're going to have to do things for ourselves. And there's a little twinkle in his eye. Is he talking about masturbation? I'm like, what? This is crazy. Is that about masturbation? It's great. And then the little boy comes home and he uses the N word the next day. On the front porch, he uses the N word. And Robert Preston says, don't use that word. That word is a bad word. You're going to make people feel bad. Yes, that's a bad, bad word. Do you want to make people feel bad, Rufus? And Rufus says, no, I don't. He says, then don't use that word. That's a mean word. And then later, John Cullum shows up, the great Broadway actor John Cullum, and he's playing the sister of the mother. And it's intimated that he might be gay. He says he's more like his mother. He's artistic. It's like, what? This is like gay stuff in here? This is great. It's great. And when they put the little boy to bed, he starts crying, and Robert Preston goes up, and he sits on the edge of the bed, and he looks down at the little boy, and he sings a song to him. It's Google Eyes. And he shuts his eyes with his fingers, and then he goes off and he talks to his wife. And he and his wife are on opposite sides of the bed, and they reach across the bed, and they hold each other's hands. And then they pull back the bed covers, and they start warming each other's side of the bed with their hands. And they talk directly to each other in that magical way, so connected. They talk about the future, their fears. And Robert Preston says, I want to be connected to everything, to my great-great-grandmother, to my little boy. I want to stretch off into the distance. I don't want to be afraid of life. I want to feel like I'm connected to eternity. And it is a wonderful movie. It is incredible. And I loved Robert Preston. I loved him. And to see him in a movie like this was incredible. And my mommy watched me watching it. And she was like, wow, look at him. And I know he loves Robert Preston because she and I had watched The Music Man together, and we loved that movie. I went crazy for that movie. And then I got her record. She had the old LP, and I put it on her stereo when I wasn't supposed to, when she was out, and I played it over and over again. I loved that record. I loved it. And the best Robert Preston song ever is the big 76 trombone song, and also the build up to it is amazing. Folks, attention please. May I have your attention please? I'm here to solve your problems with a wave of my hand, this very hand. Please observe me if you will. I'm Professor Harold Hill, and I'm here to organize the River City Boys Band. Hold up. Just think, my friends, how could any pool table ever hope to compete with a slide trombone? Just think, my friends, what those famous trumpets did to those fabled walls of Jericho. Oh, billiard bar walls come a-tumbling down. Well, band will do it, my friends. I say, boys band, do you hear me? I say, River City's going to have a boys band. I mean, she needs it today. Well, Professor Harold Hill's on hand. River City's going to have her boys band. As sure as the Lord made little green apples. And that band's going to be in uniform. Johnny, Willie, Teddy, Fred. And you'll hear the clash of glittering cymbals. Boom! And the roll of drums. Dun-dun-dun! And you'll feel something akin to the electric thrill I once enjoyed when Pat Conway, Liberati, the great creator, W.C. Handy, and John Philip Sousa all came to town in the very same historic day. Dun, da, 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 da. 76 trombones led the big parade with 110 cornets close at hand. There were more than 1,000 reeds springing up like weeds. There were horns of every shape and kind. 76 trombones. Dun, 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 dun. We loved it. It was incredible. It was amazing. Robert Preston at the center of this thing. And then later I saw him playing the perfect daddy, reminding me of my daddy, being all methody and connected. It was great. And when I was 13 years old, shortly after I saw that movie, my mommy took us to New York City. The three boys and her alone in Manhattan in 1976. And she took us to a Broadway musical, and I loved it. I loved it. It was great. My brothers liked it too, but I could not believe what I was seeing. And I think my mommy realized that. She looked over at me and she realized that I was loving this movie much more than my brothers. So the next night, I don't know how she did it. She got rid of my two brothers. My older brother was like 17 and my little brother was like 8. I don't know what she did with them in Manhattan in 1976. It was like crazy. And she got rid of them somehow. And she said, Jonah, do you want to go see a play? And I said, I'd love to. And she said, I have just the play for you. And she went to the half-price ticket booth. I don't even know how she got these tickets. And they were great seats. And we went to the theater, and there, a huge Broadway marquee said Sly Fox. And I said, why is she taking me to this? Why is she taking me to this play? So I sat down, I was all excited, and then the curtain went up, and I could not believe what I saw. There in front of me. And the audience couldn't believe it either. They went crazy, cheering for a full minute. And there, standing in front of me, in person, alive, was Robert Preston.
I couldn't believe it. He was right there in front of me, my hero. The best salesman, the best ripoff, the best father in movies ever. And he was right there in front of me. And he said his first line, and the audience went crazy. They cheered and they laughed for 3 hours straight. It was amazing. Everything he did was so Robert Preston. And there was that sing-song voice that was going to make us all feel fine about everything. Yes, indeed, we're going to win. The Barbary Coast. The Barbary Coast is where it's at. He said these lines and the audience loved it. And it was like a phenomenon. It transcended theater. It was like something crazy. Like it was mass hysteria, as he said in The Music Man. It was insane. And I never really understood what this is about. And then I read in Richard Burton's autobiography, in his diaries, he talked about reviving Camelot when he was in his 50s. And every night the audience went crazy when he came on stage and they cheered during the curtain call. And he couldn't figure it out why. What have I done? They adore me. And he said it must be nostalgia. I remind them of myself 30 years ago. They can't let it go. It reminds them of a better time. And that's what Robert Preston was doing. He was reminding us of a better time for everybody. It was magical. There he was on stage, live in front of me. I didn't even know you could see people like him for real. And my mommy just sat there and she beamed at me. She just beamed down at me, loving me. And he reminded me when he was on stage, making everything right, solving all the problems, making everybody feel fine, of my father. That was my daddy, Daddy Pete. I so loved him. He was my hero. He wore a suit every day of his life, a suit or a tie with a blazer. Now, he was an attorney, so it was expected of him. It was expected that he would wear a tie every day of his life and some sort of a suit, right? But I loved it when he came home because then he just shared his suit and his tie with us. It was just with us. And he was so unpretentious about it. You know, he wore these club ties. They weren't fancy ties. And he wore Brooks Brothers suits. He was very low key about it. He wasn't all show-offy and Italian, you know, with cut suits, you know, like really tight in the bottom. He wasn't like that at all. He wore a suit to inspire confidence. And he wore these lovely ties that I adored. And he only tied them once because he didn't believe in Windsor knots. Windsors. Windsors are too thick. Yeah, there's no Windsor or half Windsor or quarter Windsor or Winnie the Pooh-Pooh. Winnie the Pooh-Pooh ties, that's what that is. Just one knot. That's all anybody ever needs is one knot. If you've got a knot, you're ready. There we go. And every morning he'd put on his tie. And he put down his flap, and then he either put on a suit or he put on a blue blazer. I loved him in his blue blazer. I used to pick him up at the ferry terminal when I was able to drive. That was the deal. I'd get the car for the day, but I had to pick him up at the ferry terminal and drive him home. And there he came across the windswept, water-swept, rain-swept parking lot in a blue blazer and tie. And I loved it. And I drove him home. And when he got home, he'd sit in his big leather chair. He'd had it his whole life back when it was cloth, when he lived with my grandma, who we all loved, this big cloth chair, and he had it covered in leather. And then my mommy would bring him his drink. And this is the sound I always associated with my father. That was the sound. Ice tinkling in his gin Gibson over ice, whatever that is. And he'd sit there and he'd say, "How are you kids doing, huh? Yep. You kids look great." And he had his own words. He had his own vocabulary. I don't know where it came from, but it was all these words that we loved. If he didn't like something, he'd say, "Oh, that's criminal. Just criminal." And if he liked something, he said, "Oh, that's spectacular. Yeah, that's just spectacular." And if he was confused by something but annoyed by it, he'd say, "It's incredible. Just incredible." And if we were upset about anything, he'd say, "Come over here. Come on. Yeah, it's going to be fine. Yeah, look at you. You're a big boy. Yeah. Come over here. Yeah, here. Why don't you get up on top of this? Yeah, get up on top of that. Here, hold me hands. Oh, there you go. Yeah, let's get up again. And then he'd sit with his legs crossed, right? And he made this, there was this opening here, and I'd come up through the opening. I'd pop up when I was a little kid, and he'd tickle me, and then I'd duck back down, and then I'd pop up, he'd tickle me. Yeah, come up to the rabbit hole. And he used to skin the cat with us. Skin the cat's the best thing ever. Do you know this thing? So the little kid, gets like this with his hands between his legs, and my father would get behind me, and whoop, and you go whoop like that. You go whoop like that. It was great, and we'd laugh the whole way. And the best was when he did it with my little brother, Davy Baby. He'd skin the cat with Davy Baby, and Davy Baby had this long hair, and it would go like through the air, through the air. It was incredible. And if I was upset, he'd say, "Come on over here. Yeah, now what's your problem? What's the problem now? What are you upset about? You're upset about nothing. Oh, look at you. Are you going to start crying? Yeah, this is what your face looks like. You look like this. Is that what you want to look like, huh? And I'd start laughing because, he was acting silly. And he'd go, oh, now you're laughing. Okay. Oh, now you're crying. Oh, now you're laughing. Are you laughing or you're crying? I'm a little confused. And I'd be going, and he'd go, oh, yeah. He was great. Every night, he was the life of the party around our house. He was so much fun. And on the weekends, he'd say, hey, can I take you to a movie? Because he knew I loved the movies. And my mother took me to live things, but he took me to the movies. He said, hey, why don't we go see the new James Bond movie? We'll go see Moonraker, yeah? And he took me to Moonraker, and he was just like Robert Preston, because he sat there beside me, and he'd glance at the screen, but mostly he looked at me. And he just beamed because I was like, I was completely enraptured. I don't care where we sat, front row, back row, side. I was like in it. I was Roger Moore. I was James Bond. And in Moonraker, after Shirley Bassey sings her great song at the beginning, Moonraker, then all of a sudden, Roger Moore is on a plane as James Bond. And he's on this very nice plane. And then all of a sudden, the stewardess pulls a gun on him. And he was like making out with her. And then she pulls a gun. And then she puts on a parachute and jumps out. And then the pilot comes out of the cockpit and he's got a gun. And Roger Moore's like, what's going on? So he fights with the pilot a little bit. Then the pilot pushes him away and shoots the controls. He shoots the controls of the plane. So the plane is destroyed. And then the pilot with the parachute on jumps out. And Roger Moore, with no parachute, steps over to the door. And he's looking down. And the pilot is flying away wearing a parachute. And Roger Moore's just sitting there going like, what am I going to do now? And then Richard Kiel, that big, huge guy, remember, with Jaws, with the teeth, from The Spy Who Loved Me, he suddenly appears behind Roger Moore and he pushes him out of the plane. And all of a sudden, Roger Moore is flying through the air without a parachute. And I was like, and my father leaned over and he said, hey, he's got to catch up. He's got to catch up with a guy who's got a parachute. And I was like, what a smart guy. And so the guy's falling through the air with the parachute, and here comes Roger Moore, zooming after him. And Roger Moore figures out that if he puts his hands on his butt and arches his back, that he'll fly. He'll fly. And so the guy goes with the parachute, and Roger Moore, and he flies with, and Roger Moore, and then, and eventually Roger Moore catches up with the guy wearing the parachute, and he grabs him, and they start wrestling for the parachute, and they're rolling around in the sky, It's the best effect ever. And he's just rolling around the sky, and they're fighting for the parachute, and finally Roger Moore gets the parachute, and the guy who doesn't have the parachute just flies away without parachute. And Roger Moore is struggling into the parachute. He's going to do it. But then all of a sudden, Richard Kiel, the big guy with the teeth, he appears. He grabs onto Roger Moore, and they're spinning together, and Roger Moore's trying to get into the parachute, and Richard Kiel bites Roger Moore in the leg. He's like going, and finally Roger Moore clicks on the parachute and pulls the thing and goes, and flies away from Richard Kiel, who wasn't able to bite him. It is the most amazing scene, and my father just sat there beaming at me. Obviously, I was a lot more fun to him, his little creation, than anything Roger Moore could create. And when we left the theater, he said, that was fun, huh? Hey, you've got a parachute on, don't you? Hey, give me your parachute. And we're sitting there in the Northgate shopping mall. He's like, hey, get this parachute over here. He was so much fun. And he took me to musical movies too. My mother took me to musicals on stage. Well, he took me to the movies because he loved them. He took me to a double feature of Man of La Mancha and Fiddler on the Roof. How about that? What a double feature. It was incredible. And the best thing about seeing a double feature with him is he would sing along. He said, this is the best song ever. Here it comes. I am Don Quixote, the Lord of La Mancha. My destiny calls and I go. And he didn't sing so loud that it annoyed anybody. At least I don't think it annoyed people. And he would sing along. Oh, and our best was in Fiddler on the Roof when Topal, who plays Reb Tevye, with those big monster thighs, he sings If I Were Rich Man. And we loved the way he danced because he had those big thighs. And he used to dance. He'd go, if I were a rich man, All day long I biddy biddy bum. And my father would sit there shaking his thighs in the chair and singing along, If I Were a Rich Man. Da 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 da. We had so much fun at the movies. And he knew that I loved history. So he took me to see Barry Lyndon, all 95 hours of it, and we loved it together. And we used to talk about movies constantly, musicals and movies about history. It was just incredible. And the best thing he ever did with us was every Sunday he took the whole day off, and he took us early in the morning, all three boys, in his little Porsche Roadster. It was older than any of us. He'd had it forever, and we all loaded up in his little Porsche Roadster, and we went to the International House of Pancakes, IHOP. And my mother, he said, well, let your mother sleep. But she never wanted to go to IHOP. She thought it was a greasy spoon. She thought it was disgusting. You know, she grew up poor in Michigan, and she clawed her way up into the upper middle classes. She just clawed her way up. And once she was up in the upper middle class, she did not want to have anything to do with greasy spoons. She didn't want to be around tables without tablecloths, or waitresses that looked like they came off of TV, or noisy bus stations, you know, where they're dropping the plates in. She didn't want to be in that. She used to say, does it have a tablecloth? No, I don't want to go there if it doesn't have a tablecloth. Do they serve bread? Do they have good white wine? Otherwise, so IHOP, she hated it, but we loved it. We loved it. And my little brother would always dump maple syrup all over the table by accident. My older brother said, oh, David, you're so stupid. My father said, leave your little brother alone. He's going to eat the table. Yeah? Hey, David, eat the table. Here's your fork. Eat the table. Yeah, munch it. Ah. And then he'd wipe up the table. It was great. And the thing we loved about the menu, he said, this menu is hysterical. Look at this menu. It's so pretentious. And it was like, you know, a diner menu. It had like eggs and bacon and French toast, which I loved, you know, diner food. But there was on the menu one item. It was called cordon bleu. It was like this French thing, cordon bleu. And my brother said, what's cordon bleu? And my father said, oh, you're not pronouncing it correctly. It's pronounced cordon bleu. Cordon bleu. Because it makes you throw up, you know. That's why it's blue. It's blue. So you say cordon bleu. Bleh. Say it after me, cordon bleu. And it was so funny. It was this pretentious restaurant. And after breakfast with my daddy, where we got to hang out just with him, he'd drive us home. And we had to take this detour along what was called the Horsey Way. Now, my little brother loved going this way because it was this back road that went through our town. And there were these people who lived on it who had a stable. They had horses. And my little brother loved looking at the horses. And my father loved looking at my little brother when he looked at them, because he was so happy. And my little brother said, where's the white one? Where's the white one? My father said, oh, he's there. Oh, there he is. He's coming out of the stable. There he is. He must have been eating his oats and hay. And this big, beautiful old horse came back, and it had a big sway back, but it was the most beautiful shade of white. And I swear to God, he knew my little brother was there to look at him. And every time we showed up, the horse would come out, until one year it stopped coming out. And David would say, where's the white one? Where's the white one? My father said, oh, he's probably resting. Like your mother. He's probably having a morning off. There was no death with the horses. They just went on. And David said, well, we should probably go home and see Mommy. Bye, white horsey. I hope you have a nice sleep. And then my father would drive us up to our house, and we lived at the top of this really high lane, this really tall lane. It was really steep. And my father would put the Porsche into first gear, and he'd rev the motor, and he'd race up the hill in first gear, which shoved the odometer into the red line. It was called redlining it. And the motor would go, and the whole car would shake. And my brother said, Dad, you're going to ruin the car. You're going to ruin the car. And he said, no, the kids love this. The car can take it. It's great for the car. It clears out the carburetor. And we redlined it all the way to the top of the hill. And later in the afternoon, we all got back in the car, the three boys and my daddy, and we went out and we found a house to climb on. Now, you know, people were always building houses in my town that I lived in. And, you know, they didn't have the walls on them yet or the windows. They just had like the floors and the stairs and the fireplaces. And he'd take us to these houses, and we'd climb all over them, all over the houses. And he'd hold my little brother's hand, And he kept an eye on me, to make sure I was okay. And my older brother was okay. And we'd walk over these houses. And my father had been an engineer in college before he became an attorney. And he was always critiquing the houses, saying, what a dumb place to put a fireplace. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And look at those round windows. Can you imagine how much round windows cost? It's just stupid. And my older brother would say, aren't we trespassing? And my father said, listen, when your mother and I were building our house, every time we came up to look at the house, there were always people crawling all over it, neighbors and stuff, checking it out and asking us questions. So listen, I'm going to crawl over every house I want to, and you just watch. Nobody's going to tell us to leave. And nobody ever did. It was great. And after that, we'd go on an adventure in the car, and we're always trying to find new roads that we'd never been on and drive around them and find ways of getting from one town to another that nobody ever thought of. And my father was always looking for the Northwest Passage. Yeah, you know what that was? It was from San Rafael to Northgate. The back of San Rafael is a big mountain range with all the houses on it and all the streets. And on the other side is Northgate, is Terra Linda. And my father was convinced that there was a way to get over to Terra Linda without going on the freeway. You could get over to Northgate without going on the freeway, right? And so we spent whole Sundays in the afternoon driving up roads, dead ends, cul-de-sacs, private property, always redlining it because David loved the redlining, nosing up roads to try to find the Northwest Passage from San Rafael to Northgate. And the only thing that bugged him about hanging out with us was we had this dumb game. It was so stupid. My older brother brought it home from school. And if somebody farted, if somebody went, then everybody else could say slugs and kicks. And then you got to slug the person until they could say 3 movies. It was so dumb. So somebody would go, and immediately we'd go slugs and kicks, and we'd start punching. And it was usually, of course, my older brother, me, beating up on the little kid. It was like punch, 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 punch. And my father was like, stop doing it. Would you stop that? Put your seatbelt on. It's ridiculous. Slugs and kicks are the dumbest game ever created. Listen, don't fart and don't play that game. It's ridiculous. Fart quietly, all right? No sound. Farts are okay as long as you don't make a sound, all right? They should be smelled and not heard. And stop playing that game. Stop punching your little brother. It's ridiculous. And then we went out to dinner with my parents. And it was always at a restaurant that had a tablecloth because my mommy was there. And she liked very nice restaurants with very nice tablecloths. And then we all had to act like adults. And we couldn't slump. And we couldn't eat our food really fast and then want to leave. We had to be like ladies and gentlemen. And that's when we had my mommy. And she always had nice things to say and little stories to tell and wanted to talk about musicals. It was so much fun. And then they took us home and they sang to us. We got into bed and they'd come in and they'd tuck us in. And my father always wore these thick glasses. They were like Cary Grant glasses. That's what I called them. They were these thick glasses. Like Cary Grant, when he was in his 60s and still making Alfred Hitchcock movies, he always has these thick black glasses. And that's what my father wore, his Cary Grant glasses. Late at night, they'd come into our bedrooms, and we were all tucked in, and they'd sing to us. They'd sing us to sleep. And the two of them came into my bedroom, and my mother leaned over me, and she put an arm on either side of me, and she sang, well, hello, Dolly. Well, hello, Dolly. It's so nice to have you back where you belong. Boop. You're looking swell, Dolly. I can tell, Dolly. You're still growing, you're still crowing, you're still going strong. And I said, Mommy, what does crowing mean? And she said, you crow. You're a little crow. That's what crowing means. And then my father leaned over her and he sang right to me. He said, hot sut raw, sitting on the rail, wagga wagga suet. Hot sut raw, sitting on a wagga wagga suet. And I said, what does that song mean? He said, it's just an absurd song. It's a little silly song just for you. And the two of them smiled at me and they touched my cheeks and they gave me kisses on the forehead and cheek. And then they went into the other bedrooms and sang to my brothers. I don't know what they sang to them. Maybe it was completely different songs. They sang us to sleep every night. Well, hello, Dolly. Well, hello, Dolly. Hut, sut, raw. And I fell off to sleep, and I dreamed wonderful dreams. And when my father died, when he passed away, I knew nothing about it. I had no warning. It just suddenly happened. He'd been sick for a year. He'd known he was going to die for at least 6 months. He'd even been desperately, gravely ill at the very end for 2 days. And I never knew anything until he had completely passed, until he was already gone. Although there were hints. One of them was a Father's Day just before he died. I love Father's Day with my father. My husband Michael and I would always go over to their apartment. We'd always go over to Marin County, and I'd always take my present. I always had the same present for my father for Father's Day. And we put on our ties and our jackets, because my mommy liked ladies and gentlemen, and we went over to see my father. But on this particular Father's Day, it was pouring down rain. And it was so wet, and we didn't have a car, and the only way to get over there was on the bus. So I called up my mommy and I said, it's just too wet. It's too wet. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mommy, but we can't come. And she said, okay, well, that's okay. All right. I said, say Happy Father's Day to Daddy, okay? And I hung up. And 2 minutes later, she called back. She said, look, your daddy said he wants to see his boys. He wants to see you and Michael. Could you please just come over anyway? We'll meet you at the bus pad so you don't have to walk to our place through the rain. And I knew they would never come over in the rain to get us. And they were getting on, and they didn't like to drive in the city, and I said, of course, we'll come over. So we got our present, the same present I always gave him, and we got our umbrellas, and we head down to the bus stop, and we got on the bus, and we went over, and they met us at the bus pad. And as a special treat, my mother said, we can go to the Hickory Pit. Now, she hated the Hickory Pit. She hated it. It was her nightmare of a greasy spoon. It had the waitresses who looked like they were off TV, and had all the greasy food, no tablecloths, the noisy bus station where the bus boys dumped the stuff in there and it made all that clattering noise. And she just hated it. But you know what? On this special day, for her husband and her boy, we could go to the Hickory Pit, and we were so happy. My daddy and I, we were great. We had those big pork ribs that were covered with barbecue sauce, and their sign said the Hickory Pit, and there was this big pig leaning, a picture of a big pig leaning on the sign, and it said underneath him, pork from pigs that made hogs of themselves. I loved it. It was great. And we're sitting there eating our fries with ketchup and all of this fattening, awful, disgusting food. And we loved it. It was so greasy. And she just let it happen. And she just sat there. She did not complain. She said, well, your Aunt Aggie's doing really well. And we had a wonderful bridge party the other day. And Michael, he's a vegetarian, so he was sort of picking at the stuff. I mean, they do not serve for vegetarians. And my father was just sitting there. And he wasn't his usual lively self. He looked like he was really tired. And he just sat there, and he ate his food, and he was obviously enjoying himself, and he laughed at the things my mother said. But he was tired. So I decided to liven him up, and I decided before the food was even finished, I was going to give him his Father's Day present. And like I said, it was always the same Father's Day present. He loved the presents I gave him. He loved it. And he always acted like he didn't know what I was going to give him. And so I handed it to him, and I'd wrapped it up like 6 or 7 times. Because I realized when I was young that it was really boring to wrap a present once. It was just like, all the wrapping paper came off. Who cares about that? So I wrapped it like 7 or 8 times. It was all wrapped up. And he started unwrapping it. And he went through this every holiday. And he was like, oh, this is so much fun. Jono, look at you. I just love tearing apart. Oh, look. Oh, there's another layer. He did this every year. He knew it was going to happen. But he acted totally surprised. And he was tearing, oh, this is terrific. Oh, my favorite. Oh my goodness. Soap on a rope. Oh, Jono, look at that. Soap on a rope. I love it. That was his favorite. Soap on a rope. What a surprise. This is wonderful. He knew he was getting it. And he put the soap around his neck and he sniffed it. And he was so happy and he came alive. And then it was time to go home. And we walked out. And my father said, oh, look at this. It's a beautiful sunny day. Spectacular. Look at that. It's just incredible. Hey, we'll give you a lift home, okay? We'll drive you home. And we said, you don't have to do that. He said, no, we want to. But first, let me give you a kiss while we're standing up. And he kissed me in the way that he had always kissed me. He grabbed me around the waist and pulled me towards him, and then grabbed my head and pulled that in, and he planted one on my cheek. Why did he kiss me that way? He always kissed me like I was resisting, because from the time I was 15, I had resisted the kiss. I didn't like the kisses when I was a teenager. So I was like, don't touch me. And he'd grab me around the waist, grab my head, and force a kiss on me. But I'd stopped resisting decades before. I wasn't resisting my daddy anymore. But he still acted like I was. And he kissed me. His special way of kissing his boy. And with Michael, he'd like shake his hand and lean forward and kiss him on the cheek. Much more businesslike. And then we got in the car and they drove us home. It was a wonderful Father's Day. Hickory pits, soap on a rope, and a bunch of really masculine kisses. And then I saw them 2 more times. One time was at a play I was doing. It was Not About Nightingales by Tennessee Williams. This play is great. If you don't know this play, he wrote it when he was a young man. It was like his first play, and it's like no other play of his. It is insane. It's set in a prison on an island. So the prison is like Alcatraz, right? And the warden is this evil, evil man, and he's hoarding all the money that the government gives him to buy food for the prisoners. He's like taking it and buying this really cheap food for the prisoners and saving 2/3 of the money and getting rich off of it. And the prisoners are getting sick. They're dying. They can't hold down the food. The food is terrible. It's cheap. And they're about to lead a big protest. They're about to take over the prison in a riot. It is an amazing play. And I played the warden. I played the evil warden. It was great because I like grew out my beard. You know what I mean? And I had all this scruff and this scruffy mustache and really greasy hair, right? I had all this greasy hair and I sort of stuck my stomach out and I was always like swigging from a bottle, having a drink. I was always drunk, right? And I was a totally ornery bastard. And I had this secretary, this nice little secretary, and she was desperate for a job. She couldn't quit, even though I was always macking on her. And I had this wife at home and 2 small children, but I always wanted to make it with the secretary. Come on, baby. Let's do it. And this is the weird thing. We did the play in the round, right? So it was like very environmental. So the audience was sitting there right amidst us, right? They were right with us. And my secretary had this little desk with a typewriter, and sitting right beside her were audience members. And the night my parents came, they decided to sit right next to the secretary. So my mother was sitting right there by the secretary, and right next to her was my father. And I had this really sleazy scene with the secretary, and I walked up to her and I said, you know, there was a young lady about your age over at the Pig and Whistle. Yeah, I used to love her up. And every time after I finished Love Her Up, she said the same thing to me. Do it again, Papa. Do it again. How about it, baby? And my mother was sitting there right next to the secretary. My mother goes, oh, John is so cute when he tries to act evil. And my father went, oh. I was like, thanks a lot, guys. I mean, I didn't say that, but I was thinking, great, you're sitting right there and I have to listen to this. I mean, I was in character. I was giving like this method performance. I was knocking it out of the park. And all they can say is, oh, he's so cute when he tries to act evil. But they were on my side, I could tell. They were just having fun. They loved seeing me on stage. And at the end of the play, this prisoner who was leading the riot, he broke into my office, and it was David Bika, this great actor, and he had his belt. He took his belt off, and he knocked me down, and he beat me to death with his belt, and I squealed like a little pig. I was just a little wimpy guy when he came right down to it. And he was like beating me to death, and I dislocated my arm. My whole arm dislocated. My shoulder popped out, and it was like here. So I was dead, and I crawled off stage, and I ran backstage, and the curtain call was coming. So I stuck my arm out to this other actor. I said, pull on my arm, pull on it. No! And he put my arm back in its socket, right? And I ran out on stage, and I bowed like this. And afterwards, my father came up to me, and he said, Jono, are you all right? I said, yeah, I'm fine. You look like you're in pain during your curtain call. I said, no, I'm fine. That was just acting. I just, it's nothing. He said, okay, I worry about you up there. Just so long as you're okay. And it was a play performed in the Mission, and I was worried about them, coming to the Mission to see one of my plays. So I walked them to their car, and their car was parked across the street. It was a little green Porsche, my father's old Roadster. It was parked right there on the sidewalk, and somebody had taken the aerial and folded it into a clothes hanger. It looked like something you'd hang your suit on. I thought, oh God, how embarrassing. My father comes and sees my play, and he ends up with a coat hanger. And he said, oh, isn't this funny? Look what they did. And now it's all fixed. Okay, great. Good show, John. And he came up to me, and he grabbed me around the waist, and he pulled me in. And he grabbed my head, he pulled my head down, and he kissed me. And I felt the stubble on his cheek because it was late in the day. And then he got into his car with his wife and drove home, waving out the window as he went. Spectacular, John, spectacular. The last time I saw them, I had no idea it'd be the last time. They'd called me up. They said they were going to come see my show, Medea the Musical. And they said, well, we don't want to park on the street this time. So we're going to park about 15 blocks away and then walk down Mission Street to the theater. I said, are you crazy? You guys are going to walk down Mission Street, mother in her little dresses with her hair and her purse and her heels, and you with your tie and your suit? You'll be eaten alive. It's crazy. You can't just walk down Mission Street dressed like that. He says, oh, no, I'll be fine. I've been working in the city my whole life. He said, have you ever been to the Mission before my plays? And he said, oh, no, but it's lovely. Your mother's all excited. And they hung up. There's nothing I could do. So they said they'd meet me at a Chinese restaurant, which was right next to the theater. And I thought, oh, that restaurant is terrible. That's the worst Chinese food in San Francisco. It's awful. But, they didn't listen to me. So anyway, they said, meet us at the Chinese restaurant at noon. So I went over to the Chinese restaurant at noon, and there they were, sitting at this huge Lazy Susan. I don't know why. It was the biggest family table ever. I guess they said, oh, the whole family's going to be here, which meant me. But they put them at the big table with the Lazy Susan. And they're like, oh, John, come on over here and sit down. I said, you guys walked down Mission Street? How was that? He said, oh, it was spectacular. It was wonderful. It's so lively out there. And every time we got lost, we said, we're going to the Chinese restaurant. They said, which one? I said, right. And they kept it. And my mother said, oh, it was so much fun. We went into one of those lovely stores. What's it called? Boboli? Bama? Is it a bodega? Yeah. And they had pinatas. It was so much fun. Wouldn't you like to get a pinata, Peter? Oh, yeah, Charlene, let's get a pinata. Yeah, we can fill it up with cocktails. Yeah, and hit it with a thing and have some drinks and ice cubes. That'll be great. And they had all these beach supplies, like little pails and buckets. We're going to go back and get some pails and buckets. I was like, why? They never went to the beach. They loved Mission Street. They had the best time. I said, how's the food? They said, oh, the food here is spectacular. This is the best Chinese food ever. Here, have some of this orange chicken. Have you ever seen chicken oranger than that? This place is incredible. The pot stickers, they are pot stickers. They stick to everything. I was like, well, they're happy. Who am I to say no? Who am I to deny it? They were happy. And when their meal was over, my mother said, we'd like everything in a doggy bag, please. Thank you. And my father said, oh, Charlene, do you have to get doggy bags? She said, Peter, yes, I do. Charlene, can we just not have the plastic doggy bags walking around town holding? Peter, late at night when you get hungry, you come downstairs and you clean out the doggy bags. So yes, we have to get them. Yes, because you enjoy them so much. And they had all these weird class things, like she would never let anything that she paid for go, and he thought it was embarrassing to always be taking food with you, like that was cheap. It was so weird, but they were happy. And there were no tablecloths, but they had a great time. And when the show was over, I walked them out onto the sidewalk. And I said, I'm going to walk you that 15 blocks. We're walking down Mission Street. I want to make sure you guys, it's getting dark out here now. I know you come to a matinee, but it's dark when you come out. I'm going to walk you down Mission Street. And they said, no. Let me get a cab. I'm going to ride a cab. I'll take your mother in a cab. I said, Dad. And he said, no, I'll get a cab. It's fine. I stick my hand out. Cabs just show up like that. John, that was wonderful. That was a great show. Give me a kiss. And he grabbed me around the waist. And he pulled me to him, and he grabbed my head, and he pulled it down, and he planted a big kiss on my cheek. And I felt his stubble, and I could smell his aftershave. It was wonderful. And I didn't resist, but he acted like I did. That was our game. And then he stuck his hand out, and a cab appeared from nowhere. pulled up. He took my mother around, opened the door for her, put her in, closed the door, came around to his side, hopped into the cab, slammed the door, rolled the window down, and said, "John, spectacular. Good work. Yes, sirree. Absolutely spectacular. Incredible." And the cab zoomed off, and he waved out the window, and I could see his silver hair in the rearview mirror. My daddy. And that was the last time I saw him. I had no idea what I would miss. Well, right after that, Michael and I, my husband, we planned to take a big trip, a trip we were so excited about. We wanted to go to Sicily. So the play closed in 2 weeks, and we immediately took off for Sicily. We were so excited. We wanted to go to Sicily so bad. Why? Because Sicily has all this great architecture in it. Renaissance and Baroque and ancient, and it has the mafia. That's great. And World War II was fought there. We were going to see it all. Everything is in Sicily, so we were so excited. So we flew to Italy, and we got on a boat in Genoa. And the boat was just like an overnight cruise ship. I mean, we thought it was going to be this big cruise ship like Princess Cruises. No, it was nothing like that. It was just like this overnight cruise ship, but it was great. We loved it. We ate in the cafeteria, and it was full of Italians. There was nobody, no tourists on it except us, and all these Italian people going to Sicily overnight to see their family. And we arrived in Sicily, and it was amazing. There were all these great volcanic islands as we came into the dock, and the boat arrived at the pier in Sicily in Palermo, the city Palermo, famous World War II architecture, antiquities, the mafia. We were in Palermo. And we got off the boat, and we were on this big pier full of Italians and all these cars, and everybody was hugging each other. And then everybody got into a car, and they all drove away. Everybody drove away. There was nobody left on that pier. There were no cabs. There were no buses. There was nothing. Everybody on that boat knew somebody in Sicily, family, friends, and they just took them away. And we were alone in this huge port with no ships in it. I mean, when we were in Genoa, there were ships everywhere. Here, no ships. There was one ship behind us, our ship, and it was empty. And we're on this huge pier, and there's all this dust. I don't know where it came from. It's just blowing around dust, dusty air. So we're like, okay. So we started towing our bags towards the main drag, right? Because we knew where our hotel was on the map, and so we'll just walk. So we're towing our bags, and we get to the main drag, and there are no cars on the main drag along the port. None. So we cross the street, and there's all this dust, and we're now at these huge shops. There's these huge buildings with these gigantic stores, and they're empty. All of them are boarded up. There are no businesses open in this part of Palermo. There's no people around. There's nobody. There's just all this dust blowing around. So we tow our little wheelies, our suitcases with the wheels, and we finally get to our street, and we turn right onto our street, and it's cobblestones. So we're towing our bags on the cobblestones. It's going on the cobblestones. And finally, there's people. There's people on the sidewalk. Okay, great. There's some people, but they're not tourists. And they're all staring at us. They're all like staring at us and looking at each other and nodding and staring at us. I'm like, why? What's going on? So we got to our hotel, and the hotel was great. It was all concrete. It was really modern. So we changed into our shorts and our t-shirts, and we had like our tourist outfits on with our special shoes, and we headed out into Palermo. And we got to the main drag, this huge street, and we looked to the right, and there was the opera house from Godfather 3. Cool. And we started heading down this main street, and there are no tourists in Palermo. Just all these locals, and they're all like looking at us and nudging each other and winking at each other and looking at us. It was weird. So we get to the central Baroque square with this incredible Baroque architecture, and there's nobody there. There's nobody. It's empty. And there's all this kind of dust blowing around. And the buildings look great. They look terrific, but they're dirty with dust. And we cross the street, and there's a full city block, like a whole square block, destroyed from World War II. What? This was 2005. This is like a whole city block that's still destroyed from bombers in World War II. And there's all this dust coming up off of it. I'm like, is this why Palermo is so dusty? Because every building was destroyed in World War II and it was never rebuilt? So we headed back to the cathedral. We wanted to see the cathedral, and we went in. There's nobody in it. It's dusty. It's beautiful, but there's nobody in it. I'm like, this is the weirdest town on the planet. And we came out, and while we were inside that plaza that we thought was so weird because there's nobody there and it was so dirty, this shack had opened up and they put out all these tables. And they were getting ready to serve pizza. And we're like, great, Sicilian pizza. What could be better? And then all these tour buses pull up, and suddenly the plaza fills with tourists. They were all in the buses. Everybody was a tour bus person. They all get off, and they all have pizza. Now, we don't like tourist places because we're like, oh, we're better than tourists. I mean, we're not, but we're like, we're better than tourists. So we're, yeah. So, but we sat right down because we were happy. We felt like, wow, tourists. Now we're with our people. We're not the only ones here. We're the only ones who aren't on a bus, but we're not the only tourists here, and we had the best pizza ever. It was incredible. So the next morning we got up early and we were going to go to Monreale. And they say if you go to Palermo, you have to go to Monreale. And that, in fact, they said if you go to Palermo and you don't go to Monreale, you are a donkey. That's what you become, a donkey. I'm like, well, I don't want to be a donkey. Okay, so we went to Monreale. And the way to get there, if you're not on a tour bus, and we don't like tour buses, right? Because we're classy. So we were going to take the city buses, just the regular city buses, like real people. So we got on the back of the city bus, which is how you enter them. And I walked to the front, and I was paying my fare, and we're the only people on the bus. So I look back, and Michael is back by the entrance, and he's surrounded by 5 guys. So there's just the 2 of us on this bus, and then these 5 Italian guys crowded all around Michael at the back of the bus. I'm like, that's weird. There's all these seats. There's nobody else on this bus. What's going on? So I said to Michael, I said, hey, come up here. Come up here with me. Hello. Yeah, come up here with me, up here. So Michael leaves the guys and he comes up with me. And I'm like, okay, well, all right. So then we get to the transfer spot where we have to transfer the bus that actually takes you up the hill to Monreale. And we get off the bus and Michael puts his hand on his wallet and it's not there. His wallet is gone. And he says, oh my God, I've been pickpocketed. And I'm like, how? That's not possible. Michael, when he travels, it's like he's a genius of self-protection. He has like zippers and pins. He puts all these pins and it's like getting to Fort Knox, his back pocket. And I'm the one who's just like, has money all over the place. And he's like, those guys had unpinned and unzipped him and gotten the wallet out of his back pocket without him feeling anything. And I thought, of course, we wanted to go to Palermo, home of the mafia. We are surrounded by criminals. Of course, we're getting exactly what we wanted. Baroque architecture, Renaissance architecture, antiquities, World War II, and the mob. So I said, okay, we have to get back to the hotel. And we're going to walk because I don't trust the buses. And we'll call and get all of your credit cards canceled. And we're walking back to the hotel for half an hour. And everybody is looking at us. They're all looking at us. There are no tourists. There's just a lot of dust and a lot of locals, and they are all looking at us. So we get back to the hotel, and we call up the credit card companies, and they say, oh, yeah, they're using your credit cards. They are buying furniture. Cancel. Oh, yeah, they're buying all kinds of things. Cancel. And we were too scared to go out for the rest of the day. We were horrified. We thought, oh, my God. Every time we step out of this hotel, the whole town lights up. Palermo's like, well, here's some tourists who aren't on a bus. No protection. Get them. Well, the next morning we wanted to go see the antiquities in Agrigento. So we got up early and we ran to the train station and we didn't look at anybody and because I didn't want to get tripped out on all this stuff. And we got on the train and it was fine. It was totally safe. And the train took us all the way across Sicily to Agrigento. But we're on this train and I begin looking at the towns along the way, right? And the towns along the way on this train, the towns are named things like Corleone. The town of Corleone. Yeah, from The Godfather, the Corleones. Yeah, guess where they came from? A stop on this train, Corleone. And the next town is Prizzi. The town of Prizzi. Remember that mafia movie with Jack Nicholson? Yeah, Prizzi's Honor. Yeah, they came from Prizzi. And then there's a town called Capone. Yeah, Al Capone. I'm like, this is insane. We're getting exactly what we wanted. All the towns are even named proudly after these people. And we got to Agrigento, and of course, there were no tourists there, just a lot of locals going amongst the ruins, these beautiful ruins, and everybody's like staring at you. And then we went to the museum, and the buses arrived, and it's like, oh, the tourists got off. But we did go to one city that we loved. Oh, we went to Syracuse. That was the same as all of them. It was like, and the ruins were great, but it's like we went to one city. We went to Catania. And we were like, oh, we'll go see the ruins in Catania. We'll go see the Baroque architecture in Catania. We got off the train in Catania and then went down to like the ticket level, which is the main entrance to the train station. And it was full of all these guys looking at us in the train station. They were doing nothing. And then they started to circle us. It was like a flushing toilet and we were getting sucked down the drain. I was like, we're out of here. And we went back up to the train. We got back on the train and we didn't even leave the train station in Catania. We just left. But there was one city that we loved, and that was Taormina. Taormina was great. And I was so excited to go there because that's where Tennessee Williams and Gore Vidal used to hang out. Well, Gore Vidal. It's Gore Vidal, my favorite. And they used to hang out in Taormina in this big, beautiful pink hotel. Well, we couldn't afford to stay there. We stayed in this little tiny hotel. But Taormina was the greatest Sicilian city because it had this beautiful Greek theater, this ancient Greek theater, and we saw this ridiculous musical put on there with this television star from Italian TV. It was about Christopher Columbus, but in the background was Mount Etna, which is covered with wineries. It's amazing. It was a great city, and it was packed with tourists. So there's none of this stuff. There was none of that. And we stayed in the best little hotel. It was so cute. And we would go down to the beach, and the beach was magical. It was called La Isola Bella, and there was this beautiful little island right off the coast. And we swam, and we ate this great food on the beach. It was my first time swimming in the Mediterranean. It was magical. And when I got out of the water, I said, Michael, could you go get us some desserts, like some ice cream? And he left, and it took him forever. And he came back, and I said, what took so long? You okay? And he said, yeah, it was really hard to order the ice cream. I said, why? He said, well, because it had these really weird American names. And I was like so embarrassed to ask. And I said, well, what were the names of the ice cream? He said, well, I got us 2 ice creams. I got us a squeal and a tickle. So you can have the squeal and I'll have the tickle. Okay? That was the name of their ice cream, squeal and tickle. But it was delicious. I loved it. So Taormina, I loved Taormina, the best food ever. It was packed with tourists, so we felt totally safe. And then we finished our trip by going to Rome. And Rome was just all tourists. There were no Italians in Rome, and there was none of that. It was just, everybody was really cool in Rome, and we had the best time. And on my last day in Rome, we had to get up early and catch an airport shuttle all the way out to the airport. The airport is called Da Vinci. Is that the best airport name ever? Da Vinci. They're so proud in Italy. So I went down to the hotel's lobby in Rome to use the internet because there was no Wi-Fi access. There was just one terminal for the guests, and you had to wait in line, which is fine. I had time. And I opened up my email, my Yahoo, and I was looking at all the emails from people. And then I saw an email from my little brother, from David. And he never had sent me an email before. It was so weird. And then I looked at the subject. The subject was sad news. And suddenly everything fell together in my brain. So many things that happened over the last year, and I knew what this sad news was. So I opened up the email, and my brother said that my daddy had died that morning. And I was in shock. I was dumbfounded. I didn't even know what that word was. Dumbfounded, dumbstruck. I didn't even understand the concept until then, and I was numb. And there were other emails from other people asking me about things, theater things, and I started answering them. Why? And when I'd answered them all, I stood up and I was like a zombie, and I was headed back to the room. And I walked by the reception desk, and the guys behind reception were like looking at me, but it wasn't like criminals. It was just like, what is this weird guy? Because I was walking like a zombie, and I walked up to the elevator and I pressed the button and I waited, dumbstruck. And the elevator came, the door opened, I went in, I pressed start floor, the door closed, I rode up, dumbstruck. It arrived at our floor, the elevator opened, I left the elevator, closed behind me. I took out my key. I stuck it in our door. I walked into our room and I said to Michael, my daddy died. David just sent me an email. Michael said, what? I said, yeah. And he said, we should call him. So I got my phone and I figured out how to make an international call, and I called my little brother and he actually answered. I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, he had cancer and a lot of other things and he died this morning." I said, "But did he know it was coming? Was this a surprise?" My brother said, "Yeah, he knew for a year." A year? Did you know? He said, "Yeah, he told Peter, my older brother, he told Peter and me 6 months ago." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said he didn't want you to know. He told us not to tell you. Did he just suddenly pass? Like suddenly? And he said, "No, he about 2 days ago, he really got bad, and we knew that was the end. So we contacted everybody." I said, "But you didn't contact me. You should have told me. I would have come home early. I would have wanted to see him. I wanted to see him." He said, "Well, we, I couldn't. I didn't have your cell phone number, and I couldn't remember your email address. But you just sent me an email." He said, "Well, I figured it out." And I said, "What is going on, David? Explain this to me." He said, "Are you coming home?" And I said, "Yeah, we're supposed to come home today anyway." He said, "Well, just come home and we'll talk about it with Mother when you get here, okay?" I said, "Okay. I love you." And I hung up. And we raced downstairs and we got on the airporter. And we went to the airport and I had the worst headache I've ever had in my life. I thought my head was going to explode. And we got on the plane. I didn't even know this. Stewardesses, they can't give you anything. They can't give you anything. And I said, "I've got this horrible headache." And she said, "I can't even give you aspirin. Here, have some water. Just sip water and try to relax." And the more I tried to relax, the more I keened. I was keening on the plane. And Michael took the middle seat so I could sit on the aisle so I wouldn't be keening all over some stranger with my snot running down my nose. And the whole world had fallen out from under me. The guy that always made it all right, the guy that was always in charge, the guy that was always laughing at the most extreme situations was gone. He was taken from me. And I had no idea what was going to happen. And 20 hours later, we were home after this endless flight. And we got a rental car at SFO and we raced out to my parents' apartment. It took us 45 minutes to get there. We walked in the door and Michael and my little brother stepped outside and I walked into the living room and there was my mother. Like I'd never seen her before. I was used to seeing her in a nice dress with her hair done and heels and her purse. And she was standing there in a bathrobe, looking like she'd woken up, like she was completely disoriented. And she sat down in my father's chair, but she didn't lean back in it. She sat up very proper, even in her bathrobe. And I pulled up a chair across from her so that I could hold her hand. And beside us was this beautiful picture window of the bay with the city glimmering in the distance. And I held her hand. I said, "What happened?" And she said, "He passed this morning." I said, "But why didn't you guys tell me? Why didn't anybody tell me?" And she said, "Well, you were always so busy. And we know how busy you are. And we didn't want to disturb you. We didn't want to be a burden." And I said, "But why? Why when you came and saw the last show, when we had lunch, why didn't you tell me then?" And she said, "Well, you guys were going on a trip and we wanted you to have fun in your trip. We didn't want you to worry about this. We didn't want you to cancel the trip. And we thought it wouldn't happen so quickly and that he'd be here when you got back." And I said, "What? Why didn't you tell me 6 months ago? You told everybody else. And why didn't you guys figure out how to call me?" "Well, we tried. And finally David remembered your email address." I said, "Well, why didn't you call my home number and leave a message on my answering machine? I would have gotten that. I could have come home early. I could have seen him." I said, I don't know. It was so confusing and so much was going on. And I realized that I was badgering this poor woman, my mommy, in her bathrobe, looking like she'd just woken up from the most horrifying sleep she'd ever had. And I decided to let her alone. I'd have to find my answers somewhere else. And I held her hand. I said, "It's all right, Mommy. I love you." And I leaned forward and I gave her a kiss. She said, "I love you too, Jonna." And I didn't have an answer. They'd all known for months, and nobody had told me. And here I was with my mommy in her bathrobe, badgering her that I couldn't do that. But how? Why? I had to know. I had to know because I always imagined myself being there for him. When it was time for him to go, we would get together and I would sing to him and I would give him kisses. I'd make him laugh. And I'd tickle him if it took that to make him forget about anything bad. And we'd make up about any argument we ever had. We'd apologize to each other, or at least I'd apologize to him. And I'd be just like my daddy. I'd be the man with all the answers. I would solve it. And I thought about my daddy and the way he dealt with death his whole life, and he was always there. I thought about when my grandma died, and he took us to see her in her hospital bed in Oakland. And we loved my grandma. We loved her so much. She was like Ethel. She was like Eleanor Roosevelt. Yes, she was. She was like this big, statuesque American woman, so tough with all the answers. She was like Robert Preston. She always knew what to say, and she was always going to solve things, and she loved her grandchildren. And we went and saw her, my wonderful grandmother, and she was in this hospital bed in Oakland. And she had the blankets pulled up to her chin. She looked so frightened. I'd never seen her look frightened. She wasn't frightened of anything. She looked so frightened in her bed. My father walked in his suit and tie, and he said, "Hi, Mom. How you doing? You look spectacular." He walked right up to the bed, and he sat on the edge of it, and he put his arms around her, just like he did with me when he sang Hut Sut Raw, and he said, "Mom, you look wonderful, better than yesterday. Give us a kiss." And he leaned over, and he kissed her right on the lips. My wonderful daddy, who was always going to solve everything. He said, "Look, I brought the kids with me. Hey, come on over here, Jono. Come on over here. Jono was just in a musical. It was spectacular. It was incredible. Sing that song for her. Sing that song for your grandma, okay? Sing it for her. Bye, bye, birdie. The army's got you now. Isn't this great? Bye, bye, birdie. I'll forget somehow." And David's learning how to play tennis. Come on over here, Davy, baby. Come on. Now, show your grandma that your forehand. And my little brother started swinging his arm, forehand and background, and she smiled. She was so happy. We sang to her. We showed her how to play tennis, and he showed her how to serve a ball with home. Oh, grandma, you have to throw it up, and then you really have to arch your back and swing hard, and aim, and then swing hard. And she smiled in her bed, and she didn't look frightened anymore. And we all leaned on the bed, really close to her, to be close to grandma. And then all of a sudden, from the bed, we heard very quietly, and my little brother and I backed up. We're like, "Oh my God, she farted." And we were totally nervous. That made us totally nervous. Like we were embarrassed for her, and we didn't know what to say. And my father could see that we were put off by that. So he leaned over to us and he said, "Slugs and kicks." And then he'd say, "Give your grandma a kiss." And I leaned forward and I kissed her right on the cheek. And she had this wonderful hairy cheek. I could feel the little hairs on my lips. And he said to my little brother, he said, "Come on, Davy, baby, give your grandma a kiss." And my little brother got up on the bed and he threw his arms around her and he buried his head in her neck and he just hung on. And she hung on to him. And then he gave her a kiss right on the lips. My dad took him off the bed and set him down. He sat back on the bed. He said, "Mom, it's going to be fine. I'll be back tomorrow. Okay? Say goodbye to the kids." And she waved to us. And he took our hands and he walked us out the door. And he made her feel wonderful, like life would go on forever. And he did the same thing for my cousin Marguerite. I went with him to see cousin Marguerite. Now, cousin Marguerite, she was this much older woman, much older than my grandparents. She was like 90 or 95. She was so old, but she was sharp as a tack. She was so smart. And nobody could ever quite figure out what her relationship was to us. She always showed up at all the holidays, and she was really fun, but nobody knew what her relationship was to us. And my mother said, well, she was your grandma's cousin, twice removed. And my father said, oh, that's nonsense. She said, what malarkey? She was no relation. She just turned up some Christmas and has been around ever since. My mother said, Peter, that's not right. That's just not right. Peter, she is your mother's cousin twice removed. Oh, that is such nonsense, Charlie. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. It's ridiculous. But she was living in the Sequoia, the Sequoia, this retirement community over on Geary. And she had this wonderful apartment with a spectacular view. And the Sequoia is great because they have a hospital right in the building. And if you get sick, you can go down to the hospital. But the tenants were always very worried because they thought that if they got sent to the hospital, they wouldn't help them recover because they wanted their room. They wanted to sell their room to somebody else. You see, you owned your room until you passed. And then if you went to the hospital, they wouldn't help you recover because they wanted your room. And my father was her attorney, and he said, oh, Marguerite, that's ridiculous. They wouldn't do that. That's just criminal. That's completely illegal. And she said, but Peter, they're trying to take my room from me. They're trying to take my room from me. And he said, well, I'll talk to them, and then I'll come see you. So the day he went to see her, he asked me if I wanted to come. He said, you want to come with me, Jono? I said, yeah, sure. So he had on his suit and tie, and I put on my suit and tie. And we went in to see her, and there she was in her bed, just like Grandma, with the blankets pulled up to her chin, looking so scared of what was coming. My father went up and he sat on the bed and he leaned forward and he said, I talked to them. Everything's fine. Your stuff has not been moved out of the room. I went and saw the room. It's still there. As soon as you're better, you'll go back to the room, okay? It's fine, Marguerite. You look spectacular. 100% better than yesterday. And look who's here. Jono. Come on over here, Jono. Come on. Jono was just in a musical, a brand new musical. Hey, sing that song for her. Sing the song for Marguerite. Isn't this great? Sur la plage, everyone looks the same. There's no saying who you are going to meet. Sur la plage, you may run up against a Raja. Isn't that spectacular? Better than Man of La Mancha. Isn't that great? Hey, Jono, give your cousin Marguerite a big kiss. And I leaned over, and she smiled, and she had this big, toothy smile, like that. And I could tell she felt so much safer. And I kissed her on the cheek, and it was just like my grandma's cheek, except even hairier, and I loved it. And I stood up. My father said, Marguerite, it's going to be okay. Okay? I'll be back tomorrow. You look like a pip, Marguerite. Pippity pip, pip, pip. Wow! And she laughed. And we left her room. And we went out in the hall. My father put his arm around me, just like Robert Preston. And he walked me down the hall. And then he got in front of me because he wanted to get to the elevator. And he was about 10 feet in front of me. And he pressed the elevator button. And I saw him. He was in his mid-50s. And he was king of the world in that beautiful suit. And he had his beautiful silver hair standing there, taking care of everything, making everybody feel wonderful, making me feel great about the musicals I was in, making Marguerite feel safe, making my mom feel like Grandma feel like she would never die. My daddy. I was so proud of him. And that's what I wanted to be for him. That's why I was so angry at everybody. I wanted to be there when he passed. I wanted to spend time with him. I wanted to connect with him. I wanted to make him feel good if he didn't feel good. I knew he would feel great. Like he'd go off into death proud and strong and brave and ready for God, ready for heaven. I knew that about my dad, but I wanted to be there anyway, to sing to him, to buck him up if he ever got low, and I'd been denied that. And now I was just taking it out on my wonderful mommy in her bathrobe. And I felt bad about that. But why hadn't they told me? Why had none of them told me? Not my father, not my older brother, not my younger brother, not my mommy. None of them had told me. Why? And I thought about life with my father. And there had always been tensions. There had been tensions. There had been tensions for all of us. And it reminded me of this play that I read about. You know those old Burns Mantle yearbooks? There was a yearbook for every year. The best plays of 1967, 68, the best plays of 1968, 69. Well, I discovered those in my high school library, and I love them. I love them. I love the pictures in them. And I discovered in one of them the best play ever. This play is amazing. The Lion in Winter. And it's this wonderful play by James Goldman. And it's about King Henry II and his 3 sons and his ex-wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine. And it's an incredible play. And when I discovered in the book, that's not why I loved it. Not the play itself. Not yet. I hadn't read it yet. When I did read it, I would love it. But what I loved about the play was when it was done on Broadway, the star was Robert Preston. I couldn't believe it. My favorite ever. The man who was like my daddy playing my daddy with 3 sons. It was great. And I would stare at his pictures, and he grew a full beard for the role. He had played Henry II before anybody else played it, and he was supposed to have been magnificent. And I just imagine him saying those lines, "England will rule. England will be fine. My sons, you've all let me down." I could just imagine him in this role. And in the play, he has 3 sons. And it's all based on history. And the first son is Richard the Lionhearted. Richard the First. And he's a great, powerful, brilliant man. And the third son, the youngest son, is King John. And he's kind of the crazy, silly one. He's always playing around and fooling around and getting involved in plots he shouldn't get involved with. And the middle son is the creative one. And he's the one that wants his daddy's love more than anybody. And he feels like he doesn't get it. And there were aspects of all of us in those 3 characters perfectly lined up. Oldest, middle, youngest. That was my brother, my older brother, me, and my little brother. It was like a perfect play. And Robert Preston had played the role. And it made me think. It made me think about our own Lion in Winter. And how there had been tensions and troubles. And they never seemed to make sense. They seemed to be so stupid and so unnecessary, but there had been problems. And my older brother is brilliant. He's a physicist. He's brilliant. And my dad was always so proud of him and so impressed with him. But he was also critical of him. And I could never figure that out. How could you be critical of him? He's brilliant. He is brilliant. My father, he always found things to be critical about. He loved him. He was proud of him. He admired him, but he was critical of him. And my little brother got something that none of us had. When I went off to college, my little brother got 4 years with my parents, exclusive to my parents, right? And he got to be what he always wanted to be, a single child. And he loved it. He loved it. And he bonded with them in a way that none of us ever did. And I didn't begrudge him that because he was so happy about it. He loved living alone with my parents. And I didn't even realize it was happening until one day I was in college and I came home for the weekend. And I was talking about doing my hair, shampooing my hair. And I said, "Oh, I don't use shampoo. I just use bar soap." And my father said, "Oh, you should always use shampoo. Shampoo has nutrients in it that are good for your hair." And almost at the same time, like in chorus, my brother said, "Shampoo has nutrients in it that are good for your hair." I was like, what is this? Did they rehearse this? Is this a musical number? And I realized that they talked all the time about everything. And they agreed on everything. And they were bonded. They were buds for life. And even so, my father was critical of him. He adored him. It was his best buddy, my little brother, and he was still critical of him. And then there was me. Me. I was the one, wasn't I? I was the one who discovered acting in high school and wouldn't come home until after midnight. I used to say, "I have rehearsal. I can't come home." My father said, "You don't have rehearsal. Your rehearsal ends at 10. You're just fooling around with your friends down there at that school. You come home at 10. And I said, "I'm going to do whatever I want." I used to steal his car. I would take his car and drive off and he didn't know where it was. And we were arguing all through high school. I didn't want to go to college. He said, "You are going to college." I don't want to go to college. And he sent me to college. And we had these horrible arguments all the time. And then I wanted to be an actor, and he didn't think that was a good idea. He didn't think anything I came up with was a good idea, and he certainly didn't think it was a good idea. When I came home after college, when I was an adult, I was 23, and I went home one weekend, and I said, "Listen, there's something you need to know. Michael is not my roommate. He's not my best friend. I live with Michael the same way you live with Mom. Okay?" And it wasn't Michael. It was the whole thing about being gay. And I said, don't think of it that way. Just think about Michael. That's my life, Michael. He didn't like it. I mean, eventually he did. Eventually he grew to love Michael. And like I said, he had his own way of shaking Michael's hand. He'd shake his hand, pull him to him, and kiss him on the cheek. He was so admiring of Michael eventually, but he didn't like the whole gay thing at first. He didn't like it one bit. And when I started writing, he was so proud of me. He loved the plays I wrote, but he hated the subject matter. He hated it. And he hated it when I wrote this play. And he loved the play. He loved the play, but he hated the title I gave to it, The Joy of Gay Sex. He said, why do you have to call it The Joy of Gay Sex? That's the worst title ever. I said, well, I'm making a point. It's a point about how gay sex can be joyful. It's a joyful thing. This is a ridiculous title. There isn't even that much sex in the play. I love the play, but I can't recommend it to my friends. I keep telling my friends my son has a play downtown called The Joy of... And they say, what? The Joy of... They say, what? The Joy of... Why couldn't you call it Love in the Afternoon? Now, there's a good title, Love in the Afternoon. He hated the title of my play. And he also thought the plays made fun of him. They thought I was criticizing him and who he was and being an upper-class guy and a club member and an attorney. He thought I was making fun of him. I said, I'm not making fun of you. I love you. They're a celebration. I thought maybe that's what happened. Maybe there was more tension between me and him. Maybe this was his last chance to get revenge on me. The last chance to stick it to me. I would be no part of his death. Was that it? Was that it? That he was trying to stick it to me one more time from the grave? And I thought, no, it can't be. He loved Michael. And he liked my plays well enough. I mean, he didn't like all the gay, but he had no problem with them. He was amused by them. And he knew that I didn't hate him, that I was just sort of poking fun at him. He knew that's what writers did. He knew that. He knew that I adored him, and I know that he adored me. But still there was this doubt. There was this mystery. Why? Why hadn't I been told? And it wasn't just an abstract mystery. I mean, it affected me. My whole life changed after he died. It completely changed. It changed everything. I lost confidence. It was really hard for me to go on stage. I had so little confidence. I was terrified about going on stage for a while. And then I realized that I was next, that his generation has gone, he had gone, and I was next in line, that I would die someday. He was immortal to me. I never expected him to go, and there was no transition for me to see him go slowly, to ease into it. He just suddenly was gone. And I realized that I would be next. Me. And then I realized that if there was ever anything I wanted to do, I must do it. I must. I don't mean bad things. I don't mean evil things that would hurt other people. But any good thing, even remotely good thing, I must do at once. And I also realized that my whole world was Michael now. That my family, for whatever reason, and this is another reason I had to solve the mystery, my family had let me down. Maybe not intentionally, maybe accidentally, or maybe it was intentional. I don't know. But they had let me down. And I couldn't expect calls from them. I couldn't wait for them to keep me apprised. From now on, it would be just me and Michael. And when I got home and I was in bed and I was holding on to Michael at night, I would turn off my phone. The world could not disturb us. From now on, it would be me and Michael. That was my family. But I need to know. I need to solve the mystery. So I decided I would go to my older brother and I would talk to him. And I asked him, so Dad was sick for a year. When did you find out? And my brother said, well, they came to Boston and he told me about 6 months ago. I said, 6 months ago? Well, why didn't you tell me? And he said, well, he said not to tell you. He said, don't tell John. I said, why? He said, well, he didn't say. He said, just don't tell John. He said, I'll tell him if the time's right, but you don't tell him. Don't tell him. I said, well, why didn't you just call me up anyway? Why didn't you just call me? And he said, he told me not to tell you, so I didn't. It was probably the only time in his entire life that my older brother did what my father told him to do. It was ridiculous. So I said, well, did they tell you, 2 days before he died that he was sick or that it was coming? And they said, yeah. They called me. And he said, well, so what'd you do? And he said, well, I couldn't go out there because, my daughter and Jane Ann and, work and things. So I couldn't go out. So we just had a nice phone conversation. I said, oh, great. I would have flown from Italy. I wish I was you. I wouldn't have been like, well, I can't be bothered. I would have it's ridiculous. He was driving me crazy, but I didn't say that. I was like, okay, so you had a nice phone conversation. What did he say? He said, well, he just said he loved me and he loved his granddaughter and Jane Ann. And I said I loved him. And that was it. I said, well, that wasn't much help. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, God, useless. So I went to my little brother and I said, were you there at the end, the last couple of days? And he said, yeah, I was there. I said, what was it like? He said, well, he worked until 2 days before he died. 36 hours before he died, he was driving home from work. I said, really? He said, yeah. He kept going to work. He kept driving to work and working a full day in the office every day until he couldn't do it anymore. I said, that's amazing. He said, yeah. And that last day of work, he drove home and he parked the car and he walked into the apartment, and Mom said he just looked really, really tired. And after he died, I went to move the car, and it was awful. The car, he should not have been driving. The car was like parked at an angle between the two cars beside it and was sort of beached on the sidewalk, on the curb. And I could barely get the doors open. It was terrible. I mean, he should not have been driving up till then. He was on the freeway. He shouldn't have been driving. I said, were you there at the end? And he said, yeah. I said, did you see him before he died? He said, yeah, I saw him the night before he died. I said, did you talk? He said, yeah, we talked. I said, what did you talk about? He said, I asked him, I said, Dad, do you believe in God? And he said, no, I don't believe in any of that. It's all, no, that's a bunch of hooey. No, I don't believe in that. And I asked him, do you believe in heaven? He said, no, I don't think I'm going anywhere. I think I'm going nowhere. I don't believe in that. And I asked my brother, I said, what was he like physically? And David said, well, he was really uncomfortable. He just couldn't get comfortable. He sat there in his big chair and he was like always moving every 30 seconds. He was like readjusting, trying to get comfortable. And he was full of medication. He was full of painkillers. He was full of everything you could get, but he just could not get comfortable. And then he moved into the sofa in the bedroom and he just kept moving. And every 30 seconds he was uncomfortable. And I think he spent the whole night uncomfortable. I think he was frightened, but he was so uncomfortable that he finally gave over to death just to get comfortable. So I went to my mother. I was determined not to get angry. I wasn't going to get angry at my wonderful mother in her bathroom. And I asked her, what were the last days like? The last nights? What were they like? She said, well, he came home from work. That last time he went to work and he came into the apartment and he just stood there and he was wearing his suit and tie. And he looked so handsome with his silver hair still, but he was kind of stooped more than usual. And he just looked so tired. And I said, Peter, come on in and sit down. Go sit in your chair, Peter. And he went and he sat in my chair. And he just sort of slumped there. And I said, would you like your vodka? And he said, yeah, that'd be nice. And I got him his vodka. Remember, the doctor told him that he could have one vodka a night, just one. So I brought him his vodka. And I handed him his vodka. And he sat there. And he had a couple of sips. But he just sat there in the chair. And I said to him, Peter, it's dinner time. You can bring your drink. Come on up to the table. And he slowly stood up. And he walked across the room. He set his drink down on the table. He pulled the chair out. He sat down. And he put a napkin in his lap. And we had dinner. He didn't eat that much. But after a few bites, he looked at me. He said, Charlene, that was a wonderful meal. Thank you. I said, you're welcome. And then he dabbed his mouth and he set his napkin down on the table and he started to get up. And I said, Peter, we have one more thing to do. One more important thing. Did you forget what day it is? Then he smiled and he said, yeah, I did. I said, you stay right there, Peter. And I went into the kitchen and I got out the cake that I baked for him. And I put 3 candles on it. And I lit the candles. And I started singing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And I started walking into the dining room. And he started singing with me. Happy birthday, dear Peter. Happy birthday to you. And I held out the cake and I said, blow out the candles, Peter. And he went, and it was good that I had so few candles because he just barely blew them out. And then I cut up the cake and we had birthday cake. It was his birthday, August 3rd. And when he was done, he said, thank you, Charlene. That was the nicest birthday ever. And I said, do you want to go to bed, Peter? Time for bed? He said, yes. And he got up and he went into bed. And he was very uncomfortable that night. He was rolling around all night, trying to get comfortable, but he slept a little bit. And the next morning he got up and he looked so tired. And he started to get dressed for work. And I said, Peter, you don't have to go to work today. Why don't you just go and sit in your chair? Go on, go sit in your chair. But he already had his slacks on. And he went over and he sat in his chair. And he put his hand on his big wad of keys. You know that big wad of keys he has with the car keys and the house keys? And he had his hand on the big wad of keys all day long. Like any moment he'd get up and go to work. And sometimes he looked like he was going to rise and go to work. And I said, Peter, you don't have to go to work today, remember? He said yes. And I brought him his lunch and he barely nibbled at it. And I brought him his drink and he sipped it. And then it was getting on towards night. And he looked really uncomfortable. He kept shifting in his seat. And I said, Peter, would you like to go to bed? Would you like to go to bed, Peter? We can go into the bedroom. I'll help you. He said, no. I want to take you out dancing. I want to go dance with you. Yeah. We'll go to Joe's and we'll dance. I got my car keys right here. I'll take you to Joe's. And I put my hand on his. And I said, that sounds wonderful, Peter. But we don't have to go right now. We don't have to go to Joe's right now. I said, do you want to go into the bedroom? You can sit on the couch. Just rest a while and then we'll go out dancing later. So I helped him get up. And I took him into the bedroom and I sat him on the couch. And I called your brother. And I said, you should come over now. And it just killed me, that story, because I'd seen my parents dance once, and they danced like no other couple I'd ever seen dance. They had their own moves. Like I'd never seen moves before. And he sat there until my brother got there on the couch. And my mother kept peeking around the corner to look at him. And he kept his hands on his keys because he was going to take Mommy dancing. One last time, they were going to cut the rug. And I thought about all this, about what everybody had told me. I thought about what they'd said, my older brother saying that he didn't want me to know. Don't tell John, don't tell John. and saying it in such a way that my brother actually didn't do it. I thought about him telling my little brother that he didn't believe in God, that he didn't believe in heaven. He didn't think he was going anywhere. And I thought about him on the sofa there, clinging to his keys, telling my mommy that he'd take her dancing. One last time to Joe's. They were going to cut a rug one last time. And I realized that he was frightened. He was terrified of dying. And everybody around him knew. They could all see it. They could all see the fear. He wasn't hiding it. He was horrified. He had worked until almost the last day of his life because he was afraid to let life go. He'd blown out the candles because it was his birthday. He had one more birthday. He wanted to take my mom dancing because that meant he would never die. He didn't believe in God. He didn't believe in heaven. He was terrified of death. Why? Because he couldn't control it. He couldn't be the guy with all the answers. He couldn't be Robert Preston. He was facing eternity. So why didn't he tell me? Because he wanted there to be one person who didn't know he was dying. He wanted there to be one person who remembered him the way he was, in his suit and tie, with his wonderful wife, flagging a cab, putting her in the cab, getting in the cab himself, rolling down the window and saying, "That was spectacular, John. Good work." And a cab pulling away and him waving. He wanted me to remember him as Robert Preston in All the Way Home, reaching out to his wife. Eternity. I want eternity. Through my son, I want eternity. He wanted me to remember him as Henry II, still in charge, still in power, still dividing up his empire. He wanted me even to remember him as Robert Preston, as the music man. You got trouble right here in River City, solving the problem, and then marrying Maid Marian and having a baby and continuing his line. The ultimate salesman, selling himself. He wanted me to remember him strong. And he was going to preserve that as long as he could, even after death, even after he was gone. In Italy, I would have no idea. I just think of him as Daddy, who had all the answers, who would solve every problem. I'd be the person who never knew that he was afraid, who never saw it. Robert Preston did one last musical. It's an amazing show. It's one of the best shows ever. And unfortunately, it was a big flop. Go figure. But it has one of the most incredible soundtracks ever. This original Broadway cast album is incredible. And the show is Mac and Mabel by Jerry Herman. This show is the best. It has the best score ever. And it was just too much of a downer. It was just like this total downer show. It was just incredibly negative because it was all about people dying and people not getting along and people not connecting. It was horrible. But the songs are magic. And it's the story of Max Sennett, this old-time silent movie director, and his love for Mabel Normand. And he never quite loved her enough in her lifetime. And so she drifted away from him and she got involved with drugs and she died very young. She basically, killed herself. And at the very end, Robert Preston has this wonderful song. And I heard this song for the first time one night when I went to go pick up my daddy at the ferry terminal. And that was the deal. I got to be in high school with this cool car, the little Porsche Roadster, and I got to drive it around all over. I got to drive it around all over Marin and impress people with my daddy's Roadster. But I had to pick him up at the ferry terminal. And I had to be early so that when he got off the boat, he could just get in the car and I'd drive him home. And then he could have his, his cocktail and he could be his wonderful, charming self to everybody, to his kids, to his wife, everybody. But I had to pick him up on time. That was the deal. So I showed up early. And while I was waiting, I listened to the final song of Mac and Mabel. And the wonderful Robert Preston sings to Mabel's ghost. I promise you a happy ending, like the one that you see on the screen, where ties are ties and knots are knotted, and the preacher's potted in the final scene. And if you find it rough pretending, when the world goes askew, I can promise you a happy ending that has you loving me, loving you. That was my daddy. He always promised us a happy ending. And by not telling me that he was passing, he was giving me a happy ending. The happy ending he wanted for himself and he wanted me to take with me. That was his final gift, my reward for being Jono, his boy, who he loved watching Moonraker with, who he loved watching musicals with, who he loved seeing on stage, who he loved seeing his plays, even though he hated the titles, whose husband he loved. That was his gift to me. And Robert Preston, after he sings that song, he says to the ghost of Mabel Normand, he says, well, that's it, kid. Not so funny, huh? But then you always did want a love story, didn't you? Well, let me add just one Max Sennett touch. I love you, Mabel Normand. So long, kid. And as the song ended, I saw my daddy walking across that rain-swept parking lot from the ferry boat in his suit and his tie and his beautiful silver hair, holding his briefcase, striding towards me. And he threw the door of the Porsche open. He hopped in. He slammed the door. He said, hey, Jono, did you have a good day? And I wanted to say back to him, well, that's it, kid. Not so funny, hon. But let me add just one Max Sennett touch. I love you, Daddy. So long, kid. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is John Fisher, and this has been A Death in the Family. And we have been presenting live theater on Zoom and Facebook Live since the beginning of COVID-19. This is my 22nd solo presentation, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for being with me tonight. It was a pleasure performing for you. If you'd like to make a donation to our theater to support this program, you can. There's the website and my mailing address. And I'll tell you something, we have another show coming up on Tuesday, a reading of a wonderful play called Dear Elizabeth, about the epistolary relationship between Robert Lowell and Dear Elizabeth, his correspondent. So join us on Tuesday at 7 o'clock on Zoom, and you can sign up for that at therhino.org. I'll be back next Thursday at 8 o'clock on Zoom and Facebook Live with Dickens. And Dickens is about how Charles Dickens' true story kind of bottomed out as a writer. If you can believe it, he was actually kind of a failure as a writer at the end of his career. So what did he do? He fell back on acting. He went on the road as an actor. If you'd like to support these programs, you can go to therhino.org. That's THERHINO.org. Or if you'd like to send a contribution directly to us, you can send it to my home office where I'm working during COVID-19, John Fisher, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117. Thank you so much for being with me tonight for A Death in the Family. So long, kids. And everybody tuning in on Facebook Live, thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. We'll be back next week, and see us on Zoom on Tuesday. So long, kids, on Facebook Live.